Welcome, one and all, back to Saturday, which is our third day of CubeCon, the event celebrating all types and manners of Cube. I'm Justin Parnell, and I'm joined by someone that has been in the booth with me before this weekend.
Oh, it was a joy before, and I expect it to be a joy today as well.
One of the two hosts of the Lucky Paper Radio podcast. I don't want to say the main host.
No, see,
as there was some discrepancy over that last time.
Our
Andy
true,
Mangold.
Thank you. Yes, our true dynamic is that I feel like I have the desire to make stuff and the drive, and then Anthony's actually the smart one, right?
Like, yeah, I get that.
I basically just take Anthony's brains and then help bring them to the world, and that's my role pretty much.
I'm right there with you. Mm-hmm. All the podcasts I've ever done, that has been my role. You're like, I'm going to latch my wagon to this guy.
We're facilitators. We're facilitators,
exactly.
Justin, is what we are.
Yeah. We can run our mouths, which is why we're here, and they're out there winning.
They're out there winning games.
Yeah,
exactly. Precisely. But the sun rises on another day of magic here in Madison, Wisconsin. Cube, the world's greatest format, and one of the first events we've ever seen that's all dedicated to this great format.
And it's been amazing. You've been here the whole time. The first time we were in the booth, you were just gotten your feet wet in Wisconsin, but now you've been at CubeCon for 3 days. How's it been?
Oh, I mean, to say it's been good is an understatement. It's one of those times where I'm having so much fun that I'm just not going to bed like a child, basically.
Yes. No, I'm actually right there with you. You're too excited to sleep.
It's like last night I was for 2.5 hours last night, I was like, I got to go to bed. I have responsibilities tomorrow. I got to be in the booth. Then I was like, but also I could play a little more Magic. I could play a little more video games with my friends. I could hang out with some new people. I just kept doing that. So we're on a bit of a treadmill here of fun.
That is fantastic. Honestly, I've been to a lot of Magic events. I would say more than the average person.
A lot more than me, I can tell you that much.
A lot more than most people, if I'm counting the ones that I've worked and the ones that I've actively been to as for fun. And I would say we are very, very close to 100% excitement rate from all the people here. Everyone has just had an awesome time.
Very good vibes. Good vibes all across the board.
Amazing. So if we're able to do this again, and you're not here and you're watching at home, make an effort to come out. And if you love Cube, or if you're just I'm just going to tune in and see what's happening, this is the place, because there's an endless supply of cubes.
Look, I am a cube designer. I have a lot of cubes at home. I brought none of them this weekend. I was like, you know what? I'm going to a place where almost all people are going to have a cube in tow, and I get to draft my cubes all the time. I came to draft cubes from all over the world, and I mean the world. We have people here from Europe, from South America, coming to Madison for this event.
Now, you didn't bring any cubes, but co-host Anthony, he brought 2 cubes in the event.
Again, Anthony is the brains of the show, and Anthony does have 2 cubes featured in the actual CubeCon bracket. He's got his regular cube, the perhaps unceremoniously named but brilliantly designed Masters level set environment, and then his maybe a little more notable Turbo Cube, in which all players get to take a 2-mana discount on all of their spells and abilities, which causes some interesting and degenerate gameplay.
I would imagine. So best cards in that cube, we would have been calling it the Egg Cube.
That's
all of the eggs.
Guild Globe OP. Pack one, pick one, Guild Globe all day.
Yeah. Who doesn't want? Oh, it's only a Black Lotus that just makes 2 mana, but then draws you a card.
Well, we talked about how actually the Moxen are bad in that environment. They wouldn't be high a pick. It's when you can have Shadow Bug Egg, and you can have exactly.
You want 2 generic and then a colored mana, right?
If it's not a ritual that draws cards, then it's unplayable.
Right. So those 2 cubes. And have you seen either of those drafted this weekend?
I have. It's been really fun for me because I have just been walking around the tables and overhearing people being like, did you play the Turbo Cube? Yeah, I did. It was so much fun. I got to do this. It was totally broken. And I have a friend of ours here who's also been a guest on our podcast before, Daniel Wheatley. He's got a all gold cube.
Where
literally every card is gold. And every player starts the game with a Pillar of the Perrons in play. And he showed up on Thursday and just gave his cube to a stranger and said, go play. I have stuff to do.
That's amazing.
And just hearing people talk about playing that cube and how novel and exciting it was has also been, my heart grew 3 sizes since I've been here.
I love to hear it. That's fantastic. Now, you have played the cube that we're going to be covering today, and that is the J-Bro CubeCon. If you say CubeCon here, a Jonathan Brostoff will actually appear.
Yes, true.
Like a cube fairy.
Like Bloody Mary. You say it 3 times in the mirror, and J-Bro will be summoned.
Yeah. You actually just once, as I found.
You can say, and he's there.
He'll finish it off for you. Today, we are covering the Uber Bear Artifact Cube, which was designed by another podcaster, the Uber Cube's Anthony Adams.
Mm-hmm.
And the name implies what the cube is largely doing.
Does what it says on the tin, Justin. We've got a lot of artifacts floating around this environment.
So, and Anthony is one of those psychopaths that has a ton of, he has 6 paper cubes.
He was talking about bringing 6 cubes to this event, and I cannot imagine that. It sounds really intense.
They drove from North Carolina.
Yeah.
He and his podcast partners too. So God bless. I flew from Virginia, and I will be flying back. I'm not doing that drive. I've done it. I've done that type of drive before. I'm at the point in my life where comfort is important.
And we loaded up a 12-passenger van with 8 people and drove all the way from Baltimore in one day. And, what I said when we started doing it is we're making memories here. You
definitely are. No
by
question.
hook or by crook, we are making memories no matter what. Whether they're good or bad, memories are being made for sure.
Yes. So, memories of the artifact cube.
Yeah. So
what do you got?
This is a really interesting environment. So, like you said, it is in fact an artifact cube. There is a huge density of artifacts, both colorless and colored artifacts throughout the environment. But that doesn't mean there aren't more synergistic decks that can come together. So in the pod that I was in, we saw a really potent equipment deck. Pure Steel Paladin being a pretty high pick and a very strong card, considering you don't want to see across the table a bunch of equipment being moved around. We saw a green-white, basically mono Reclamation Sage deck, which is just playing all the ways to destroy all the artifacts everyone else is playing.
The hate bears, so to speak.
Yeah, I think green-white is honestly the control color pair in this cube. It has by far the most interaction for the kinds of permanents that your opponents are going to be playing.
You got some Katakis. There's like a Trigon Predator.
There's some really scary stuff. Some really scary hate cards for those artifacts.
That's a big beater.
Yeah, and some cards you never even heard of, and you're like, oh, that kind of ruins my day. Bane of Progress. I saw that hit the battlefield with 9, 12, 14 counters on it yesterday. So definitely some really swingy plays from that deck. Aggro is also a thing here. A mono red aggro deck was very scary in this pod. Made it to the finals. Turn 1 Bomac Courier, and then getting to play cards like Gut True Zealot, which is a new kind of Rabble Master variant some people might not be familiar with from, I believe, the Commander product, where you
Baldur's Gate.
Baldur's Gate, yeah.
Yes.
So you can basically you can sacrifice at the beginning of your combat an artifact or a creature to get a 4/1 Menace Haste Skeleton token.
Love it.
And when you have a bunch of artifact lands floating around, just free ways to sacrifice artifacts and turn your lands into 4/1. So
we got a lot of artifact lands now. We got upwards of 20 actually.
I know it's amazing.
Yeah.
If you ask people 5 years ago if they're going to reprint artifact lands, I think you would have universally heard no chance. That was a big mistake. Never again.
I think people did, and it was Wizards of the Coast that said absolutely not. And then they're like, wait a second, we can just print outrageous cards in Modern Horizons. So.
Yep. On a long enough timeline, they will print everything again.
Exactly.
But we'll keep getting back to all the mechanics that people thought were mistakes and thought were problematic.
That's right. Speaking of problematic, I have seen a Horde Smelter Dragon in this cube, and it has won both of the games very easily of the games that I watched.
Yeah, very swingy cards for sure, which I think makes for exciting games. It'll be fun to watch on coverage. And also do note that it is an artifact cube. That does not mean there aren't powerful cards that don't have anything to do with artifacts.
Yes.
There's Hymn to Turok. There's Strip Mine. So there's really powerful cards floating around you have to be scared of. I want to call out that everyone should be on the lookout for Tower of the Magistrate. This is a land from Mercadian Masks you may not have heard of. It taps for a colorless, and you can also tap it to give something protection from colorless until the end of turn. Protection from artifacts, rather, until the end of the turn, which when there are so many artifacts running around, it's kind of like a Mother of Runes on a land, which can be pretty scary.
Very scary. Now, you talk about swingy cards. Let's talk about some swingy cards that aren't present. There's no Planeswalkers in this cube.
Right. No Planeswalkers.
And there's a lot of Planeswalkers that care about artifacts.
Yeah, there's a lot you could run.
But they're not evenly distributed between colors. And obviously, they are kind of a game warping thing when you have that, especially when in a lot of cubes that are more traditional, where they're maybe not quite focused on a specific thing so much, you have to work a little bit harder to say, look, I have Duretti. I want to make sure I get artifacts, or I have a Tezzeret, make sure I get artifacts. This time,
here you just get it.
You just show up.
It's kind of just a freebie. So, those would be really high picks, and you wouldn't have to actually draft around them. Just drafting normally would end up with a fantastic Duretti deck.
Yes. So they're all gone. No Planeswalkers. A lot of interaction still, like you said, not limited to just the artifact-specific thing. Looks like our drafters may be getting ready. And at the end of the day yesterday, we got to see what I now know is one of your guys, Theo McGrath.
Theo, bull boy,
slayed the dragon as we called it. Took down Sam Black from running the
first L of the
table.
day for Sam Black.
First L of the day after taking down 2 drafts yesterday in the finals of a third and walloped.
Yeah, I told you this before we got on camera today, but Theo is actually from New York. He's in Baltimore for 5 months, temporary member of our play group.
Yeah.
And this guy rocked up and just started mopping us. Just every single draft, it was like, oh, are we all bad at Magic? Is this what happens?
I think Theo's just really good.
He's extremely good.
You really love to see it. And he was trying to downplay his ability yesterday. We're like,
he's very soft-spoken and very humble.
He very much so. And I was like, buddy, we have it on video.
We can review the VOD,
and
we can demonstrate that maybe you're actually a little good at this game.
Theo, not going to be the drafter we're following. We're going to try to follow Sam Black and see how he navigates this artifact cube. If he can make a comeback from his devastating loss. And let me tell you, he was unhappy for the rest of the evening about that loss. Not necessarily upset at Theo, but just that he couldn't do the 9-0.
Yeah,
full 9-0.
I find that tends to be an earmark of pro players. When they lose, they get very mad and tilted, and they then mess up in the future. That's very common for professional Magic players.
So Sam knows. One, he knows I called his draft last night. He knows I'm in the booth now. He knows he's at the feature draft area. So
a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure.
And you know what? Obviously, a spot that he could potentially be used to being in, but even still, it's something you got to be thinking about. You don't want to be on camera and get to the finals of 2 drafts in a row and lose.
And I got to say, I'm particularly interested to see what Sam Black does with this environment. Sam, known to be a very inventive drafter, a very inventive deck builder. We've seen him draft a lot of 3 and 4 color decks over the weekend, perhaps combining cards in ways the cube designers didn't even envision to pull out wins. And this environment is going to be really interesting to see what he does with all of these novel cards that maybe don't see play in other kinds of cubes.
And this is really an excellent opportunity. This cube in particular is an excellent opportunity for people that can really read the draft to see what sort of piece of synergy can I put together that other people might be ignoring or maybe not valuing as highly. Because this is not something that I would say for most of these drafters that they have experienced a ton before with this type of environment. You know, even if you're a cuber, most of the time, I would say on average, you're probably drafting more traditional cubes, and this is one that has a very specific aesthetic, strong flavor behind it. So I don't know. You've drafted this cube before. What if you had to guess? Just a wild guess.
You know, I hate to speculate, but
here
I'll do it for you.
Okay, thank you.
What are we guessing? What do you want me to guess?
What's Sam doing? What's he gonna do? Dive in.
You know, I think we're gonna see Sam in some base blue, many-colored deck that is gonna be trying to play a lot of these standout cards. So again, this environment, I think things we should be looking for here is one of the biggest changes again is that I think green-white, especially green, is really the controlling color in this cube. Right. And people that haven't played this cube before, maybe haven't experienced that can be very disorienting because in almost all of Magic, more broadly speaking, we see, you know, blue-white, blue-black, some, you know, blue-red sometimes be the controlling color pairs. Here it's green. Green's your base control color. We also need to be on the lookout for these really swingy cards, your Banes of Progress. There are also cards I had never seen before. There's a 4-mana instant that makes a 3/3 beast token for every artifact your opponent controls. Never heard of that one before, and that one's extremely potent in this environment. So I think we should be on the lookout for those cards that are much better than you might expect them to be.
And Sam really likes to draft his lands.
Yes. And so there are lands on offer here. Maybe not as much fixing as you might see in a cube of this size typically. I think a lot of the reason is there are so many colorless cards.
Yeah.
So that's also why you can play maybe a greedier deck because, you know, if you're a 3-color deck, but 2/3 of your cards can be cast with no colored mana, then you have a lot more flexibility in your mana base. You don't have to have quite as much fixing to still be able to play your strategy on plan, or on timeline, rather.
I think Sam would scoff at the notion of him being greedy, but I think people outside of it can say that that's something that he does, but generally can pull off. But that's
I went with inventive, you know, a very innovative, creative, expressive drafter and deck builder.
I agree with you.
Okay, good.
To be clear, absolutely greedy.
Is he going to watch this afterwards, you think?
Yes.
Okay.
Sam?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's gonna watch.
Sam is my favorite professional Magic player. Truly inspiring.
Sam and I drafted together last night. He knows what I think of him and how I somewhat reveled in his loss. Not because I wanted to see him lose specifically, but we're making the story for coverage.
Look, we want to see an upset.
Yeah, we want to see an upset, and that was the
America loves an underdog story.
The young upstart taking down the grizzled veteran,
right,
in a classic matchup of Sly versus The Rock. I mean, what do you want? What else did you want?
As a viewer, I want to see game 5s. I want to see tight matches. I
want
to
see magic. That's what we want.
I want to see games come down to last turn, last hit. That's what I want to see. So
I want to see the extended, as much magic as we can get.
Exactly, precisely.
Yeah. So Sam, in a position to not have his trusty fetch land, basic land typed land to be able to hang his hat on, which is something that he will very often do.
Yep.
So I'm very curious to see how he drafts these lands in this cube. We talked yesterday, I talked with Sam about his experience drafting the Desert Cube.
Yep.
Now, the Desert Cube is a cube that we have here at CubeCon where you actually have to draft all of the lands that you're playing.
Yes, so you don't get to take basics out of the land box at the end of the draft and throw them into your deck. Instead, you draft more cards in the draft, and you got to draft all your lands. You get to the end of those packs, and you only have 14 lands. Guess what? You're playing a 14-land deck.
14. Yeah, Sam told me how he was reveling in first picking a Plains in pack 2, and half slammed it down.
I mean,
happy to do it.
I think sometimes we forget how good a basic land can be. You know, I see Commander players do this all the time where they have tons of tap mana fixing. It's like sometimes you really just want to draw an island, you know?
That's
Island's
true.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Comes in untapped, taps for blue mana. I mean, better than a lot of other lands.
I obviously play Commander quite a bit. I'm a lover of basic lands.
Yeah.
In my decks. I also don't like shuffling. You know, I'm not.
Sure,
I don't.
I mean, certainly not with your
shuffle.
Commander decks. Those are kind of big and bulky.
Yes, and as Wizards of the Coast like to point out with Yorion, dexterity can be a problem.
It's true.
Maybe they hadn't heard of Commander when they made that comparison. Either way,
the one other thing I want to point out about this environment that was I learned in my draft of it yesterday is that, you know, the artifact dual lands, which we see, they have indestructible, right? Because I think one of the play patterns of artifact lands is that it can be pretty tilting and swingy to turn all of your opponent's shatters into sinkholes.
Yeah.
So we see that the enter the battlefield tapped dual lands with artifact types have indestructible, which I just kind of shortcutted in my head to, oh, these lands can't be interacted with. But that is not true in this environment. You can get your land Lean in Relic Warder. That can happen here.
Ooh-wee.
So that is something we should be on the lookout for. I think those artifact lands are high picks because of all the artifact synergies, and they're high picks because fixing is at a premium here. But they also can come with that downside of you can have your lands interacted with, and I lost a game that way. So I know it all too well.
Yeah, it seems like free real estate, but obviously you're always at risk because this is a cube of are you on the artifact side or are you on the anti-artifact side?
Yeah,
and it may the decks might not land that cleanly between that divide. Most decks are going to probably have a little bit of both, but you can definitely choose the opposite and say this is an artifact cube. I am not interested in artifacts. I'm interested in the cards that don't like artifacts.
I'm going to revise my prediction for Sam Black's deck. I said base blue. I'm going to say base blue green. I think we're going to see blue for some of the most premium card selection, for some of the most premium artifact matters cards. And we're going to see green for the best removal in this environment, I think. I think by far the best interaction in this environment is the green cards.
And there is just, I mean, and green has some sledgehammers too. I mean, we have the Great Henge, we have Esika's Chariot.
Yeah, that card's an artifact, so that gets to be in the artifact queue.
We have Viridian Revel, which not a card that people might be super familiar with, but a wild card advantage engine, Viridian Revel, 1 green. Whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card as an enchantment. And that is something that is going to happen quite frequently, generally in most combat steps, at least once.
So here's some story time. The card I was referencing earlier is called Curious Herd. 3 and a green for an instant. You make a 3/3 for every artifact your opponent controls. Very powerful card in this environment. I splashed it in my Grixis deck out of the sideboard in one matchup. And this game was super long, navigated this really long board state. I was behind the entire game trying to just stabilize, get things going, just building up to a big Curious Herd that I was planning to get my opponent with. You know, they were chipping in damage, and I knew at some point they were going to say, I have lethal on board. I'm swinging all out. And so I navigated the board, I think, brilliantly. I laid this trap for my opponent, cast a Curious Herd, blew them out, and they, second main phase, just followed it up with the Cataclysmic Gearhulk. That's just balance on a stick. So all of my hard work was lost, and so was the game.
Well, I feel like, all right, we got some judge announcements. We're gonna pause just for a moment.
Good energy in the room, though.
Good energy. People really excited to be here. Chat calling out Pest Infestation. I absolutely love that card.
That's going to be a beating here too.
Yeah, it's so good. That's one of my favorite commander cards printed in probably the last 2 years.
Absolutely. There are no shortage of big blowout green cards in this cube.
Yeah.
Like Pest Infestation is maybe not even among the top 3 or 4 best green cards.
That's
saying
something.
something.
That's really saying something.
So if you notice an issue, please tell the judges who did you notice that issue. That way we can help solve your problem.
And as a reminder, this is the first draft of the day, so we got a little, some extra announcements as it's kind of serving as a player meeting for the day as well. So,
got to remind everybody to zone draft. I wish I could have this judge come to my local play group and tell everybody to zone draft every week. That would be very nice.
Our head judge Livy has been absolutely fantastic. Really, the entire staff here at CubeCon,
So great.
All doing it for the love of the game.
Yeah, this is definitely an event where you can tell everybody is here because they really want to be here. The judges especially. I saw a couple of judges talking about the fact that they got to rule on interactions they would have no other opportunity to rule on in all of Magic. And for some judges, that's like what you live for, right? You want to be there trying to explain specific rules interactions that come up very rarely, and that's what Cube is great for.
Yes, and every single person here, every single person in this room, and I'm talking to players, I'm talking to staff, everyone loves Cube.
Oh,
even every person that is involved in this absolutely loves Cube. There is no shortage of that. No one just rolled up and is like, yeah, I'll help, I guess. All right, draft is ready.
I think we're ready to break into these packs.
Sam Black.
There's that Gut True Zealot that I mentioned earlier. That card rearranged my face yesterday quite handily.
Didn't rearrange your face. Yeah.
See a couple artifact lands here. Basalt Monolith being pulled to the front of the pack. Maybe Sam already thinking about going big. That Basalt Monolith is a injection of big mana. Now we see Zabaz the Flicker Wisp or some other wisp, wasp, Flicker Wasp, brought to the front of the pack here. That's the big modular tribal card.
That's right.
Big payoff for any kind of modular deck.
Double your modular. And that would be
Glimmer Wasp. That's what it
there
was.
You go. Good on you.
Yeah.
That would be I don't want to say that is a kind of a signpost of what you're going to be doing, but that's
I think it's a bit of a signpost.
I think that's quite a powerful card, putting you into the very aggressive modular deck.
And that is what we see Sam Black taking here. So perhaps going to be taking an aggressive slant in this draft.
I love it.
And I got to say, aggro decks can be very scary in this environment. There's some certain artifact payoffs that you might not be familiar with in typical Magic that are really scary in an aggro deck.
Yeah, you have you don't have what is potentially the most powerful card in cranial plating. I believe that is.
Crypt plating is in the cube.
It is?
Yeah, and I think it might be in the black section over there potentially, but it is definitely in the cube because I saw people.
The famous black card cranial plating.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Look at this pack. We see a Stonecoil Serpent, a Perilous Mirror. I think are maybe some of the cards you should be looking at here. Perilous Mirror is one of these cards that I think people underrate a little bit. That card is great blocker, great attacker, and good at closing out games.
I played a lot of.
We see Sam taking the Monoskelion. This is a 2-mana 2/2. It's a 1/1 that comes with a +1/+1 counter, and you can pay 1 and take that counter off to ping something. Another very aggressive card.
Limited all-star.
Yeah.
Monoskelion. I've played quite a bit of Scars of Mirrodin Limited. I'm familiar on both sides of the table with Perilous Mirror.
Now, Sam Black has a great article I love talking about the difference between small games of Magic and big games of Magic and how every card you play and how you cast them is either voting for a big or a small game. We see him taking a Steel Overseer here, another aggressive card. And I would say Sam, so far, voting for small games of Magic. He wants the turns to be short and to get his opponent dead quickly.
Yeah, I don't want to be playing for too long. And obviously picking up a card that is focusing on modular, another card focusing on counters.
Three cards so far, all +1/+1 counters.
Steel Overseer, probably the slam dunk pick for Sam in that last pack.
Yep. So now, I mean, Sam is really going to be looking for your Hangerback Walkers, your Walking Ballistas, cards that will pay him off for being able to put all these counters on things for the modular stuff. Arcbound Ravager also in this cube. So
we know Arcbound. I think we all know Arcbound Ravager. And that's powerful in any environment it often ends up in, as it is wont to do.
We see a Basilisk Collar brought to the front of the pack here.
That's interesting. That is maybe a concession of I might not be the only powerful deck, powerful aggro deck here, and could be trying to hedge a little bit with Lifelink, which I would imagine is at a premium in this queue. So Sam on what is a Saga.
I believe that's the
That's Artificer class
there you go.
from the recent one of the recent Commander sets.
Looks like he's between Artificer class and Basilisk Collar here.
So Artificer class lets each
And it is
artifact,
the Artificer class.
yeah, and taking the Artificer class, and that reduces the casting cost of artifacts, the first one by 1, which is obviously very good.
One of the big payoffs that I saw in our draft yesterday in this pack that people might not be familiar with is Tempered Steel. That's a card that gives all of your artifact creatures +2/+2, a really pretty nuts anthem if you have an artifact creature deck.
Double Glorious Anthem would be for Sam right now.
We see, I believe,
Oni
Cult Anvil, correct, being taken here.
Okay, so black and red.
Yeah, that is, I think, also an aggressive card. It's really nice when you're an aggressive deck to be able to close out those last couple turns of the game without necessarily having to get into combat. Your opponent may have blockers in the late game, and so being able to have that reach in a card like Oni Cult Anvil will be very helpful.
Great for just kind of tangentially creating value over the course of the game if you can get it down early in an aggressive deck, because you're going to be able to get that off of blocks too as your artifacts go to the graveyard.
And to be a little optimistic at this point, the Oni Cult Anvil is going to have some interactions with the modular cards. If you're able to sacrifice your modular creatures and start putting counters around and putting them where you want them, that could be quite potent.
And we see Sam with 5 cards and 3 colors of cards currently. Wow.
Justin, this is one of the cards I called out pre-draft. That's Tower of the Magistrate. I think a standout card in this cube, though a card people are maybe not used to, but Sam also has
very
read.
Quickly. And take a look, see what's in the rest of the pack. We did see a Goldspan Dragon.
Didn't even take a second look at that Goldspan Dragon. I'm taking this Tower of the Magistrate, and I got to agree with that pick. I think that card is kind of messed up here. Also a beautiful card, it must be said.
And it's not only gives something a kind of a trick with Tower of the Magistrate. You can unequip your opponent's creatures
just
a lot of
pop
times.
Those equipment right off whenever you want, which means that all the equipment is kind of effectively dead on board, right? Like if you can remove it at instant speed whenever you want, like who's going to bother equipping it?
Other than famous black equipment Cranial Plate.
So true, except not. That's still colorless. You can still pop it off.
I did come back on. It just slaps back.
Color
on.
identity is different than color, but yes. Well, I mean, that would be able to attach instant speed.
Yeah, you can put it
that's
back
true,
on.
That's true.
You can take it off, but as the famous black card that it is.
There you go.
Yeah, you got your swamps ready. So Sam, in an aggressive slant so far, but has drafted Artificer class, blue card, Oni Cult Anvil, black and red card.
Yep.
I would imagine, as we had discussed, Sam loves to draft lands and will probably be looking to draft some of those if he finds them, because they haven't really come up yet.
Right. I would say at this stage of the draft, I would expect Sam is not committed to any one way or the other. I think the Artificer class, the Oni Cult Anvil, may be a little bit speculative, and we'll probably see in the next couple of picks, maybe an open color start to make itself obvious. That's Arkham Dagsit at the top of the pack here, a way to cheat non-creature artifacts from your deck into play. I really wanted to play this with Bolas' Citadel. Didn't get to make it happen, but that's the combo I would love to see somebody pull off.
And then we have a Nature's Chant, which is a green or white disenchant.
Yep. Very flexible removal spell here.
So we see what is our first dual land in the, I believe that was the blue-red bridge. I got to be honest.
Dross Forge Bridge, I want to say. Dross sounds green.
Dross is, I would say black.
Okay, well, I think maybe it is then. Dross Forge, that's... Oh, it's a blue-red one. So
blue-red, yeah. And the pick was the Arkham Dagsum. So Sam,
a bit of a sort of left turn maybe from the very aggressive strategy. We're looking at a 4-mana 2/2. It doesn't beat down the best, but this is where I think we might see the Sam Black inventiveness come to play.
Yes.
Sam is now going to be on the lookout for maybe a little package of potent non-creature artifacts he can use to turn that Dagson into a very scary threat.
This looks like a Warhammer 40K card.
It looks like a Surge card we see there, yep.
And I will be honest, I do not exactly know what that card is, so we'll figure it out if Sam drafts it. But we have a Recombobulator...
Scrapyard Recombiner, is that what that was?
Scrapyard Recombiner. Thank you.
Another modular creature.
That's why you're the expert here.
Another modular creature. Back to our first pack.
Now, normally, in this situation, in a normal cube, you're like, yes, got that Loso goal in the wheel. Obviously, not quite as powerful here when not as many people are affected by it.
Now we see Sam Black looks like considering that black-white dual land, despite having no white cards, and I think that is a classic Sam Black move.
It is.
He wants to give himself options in the future picks of the draft to take those powerful cards if they still come up. I'm a little surprised to still see this Stonecoil Serpent in the pack, to be honest.
Yeah, I actually thought Stonecoil Serpent was in contention for the pick last time.
Mm-hmm. And we see it being compared with a Chromatic Sphere here, a great way to splash those one-of cards that are particularly potent if you just want, a couple incidental sources of other colors of mana. I splashed green in my Grixis deck off of Treasures and one Golgari Signet, and it was perfectly reliable.
Love it, yeah.
And we do see that Chromatic Sphere being taken, so the Stonecoil Serpent continues to make its way around the table. And, Justin, are we going to get to live the dream I so badly want to live, and Arkham Dagsson into Bolas' Citadel? That's what I really want to see happen.
And so this is now that Sam has this, I believe we could be seeing a full commitment to moving away from a specifically aggressive deck.
Yeah, that's true. And, it's worth noting that some of the aggressive cards are not always inherently aggressive. Mono Skeleton, I think, is a great example of a card that
absolutely
great in an aggressive deck, but also pretty darn good on defense. If you just can use that to pick off your opponent's threats, it's hard to get into combat with a Mono Skeleton when you have that 1 mana up to take that counter off.
We see CDH All-Star Wishclaw Talisman.
Yep.
And that obviously good when you have a number of sledgehammers your opponent is not easily able to deal with. Or in this cube, if you can gift it away and then destroy it immediately.
That, or, untap it. There are ways to untap things here, so you could get a couple cards from it. I would say I wouldn't be looking to play that card unless I could either reliably destroy it or win immediately after I activate it. And we see Sam taking it. So Sam, so far, building a deck where he's going to have ways to get the cards he wants. We see Arkham Dagsson, we see Wishclaw Talisman. That's 2 tutor effects already in this first pack. Now taking that black-red bridge.
Be able to cast the cards he wants as well. And Horned Helm versus Regrowth. Sam's going to go with the Regrowth.
Our first green card, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So we have cards in every color now except for white, but we do have that white fixing land. So, I guess Zabaz does have a white activated ability. So.
Yeah, so Sam, as usual, making sure he has all the colors of the rainbow available to him at the end of pack 1.
I love where this draft is headed. I think we have a lot of cool options going into pack 2. The Tower of the Magistrate is a great pickup, and we already have the Arkham Dagsson Bolas' Citadel combo, which I truly hope ends up being the right thing to do, so we see it on stream.
Even if it's not the right thing to do, it might be the same thing to do.
I mean, if it's the same thing to do, then it is the right thing to do, because he is, in fact, Sam.
As far as we're concerned,
it would probably be the wrong thing for you or I to do. We would just, we would dumpster the draft if we did that, but Sam will make it work, I bet.
And that is Stone
Last
Idol.
pick, Ancient Stone Idol.
Ancient Stone Idol, thank you.
That's a big old Goblin Welder target, I would say, in this environment. You get to make a bunch of 6/12s with Trample. Pretty good there.
Don't need too many of those in the game.
Yep. That will not be able to be cheated into play with the Arkham Dagsson, though, as it is a creature.
A
lot of lands in this
on
pack.
A ton of lands.
Who shuffled this cube?
Heirloom Blade, shout out Usman. And we have they shuffled it.
Thieving Skydiver is a card I had in my draft pace today, and it felt really, really strong.
Yes.
Again, everyone's going to have artifacts in their deck, and I feel like that card's already very good in a lot of power-motivated vintage cubes.
Yes.
And in those environments, you don't even know if your opponent's going to have an artifact. Here, every opponent is going to have an artifact, so I think it goes up considerably in pick order, and we do see Sam taking it.
Pretty easily. I think once he found that in the pack, he's like, let me just take a look of what I might be able to wheel out of this.
Or, what am I passing? Let's see what I'm giving my opponents, but I think that is definitely the pick.
I think Sam is happy with that. Regardless of how his deck works out, whether he ends up being slightly more aggressive or a little more controlling, Thieving Skydiver plays well in every phase of the game, really, in this cube.
Got a Sculpting Steel, a Signet. Sam reading some cards he's unfamiliar with. There's a lot of new cards in this cube. That's, I think, the joy of an event like CubeCon. Baleful Strix.
Oh, and a Whirler Rogue.
A lot of good options in this pack.
Very, very good ones.
Manglehorn, a huge beating in this environment. One of those cards that gets that much better when your opponents are playing so many artifacts. We see him looking at another Warhammer 40K card that Justin, I'm like you. I am unable to comment on those cards. I
don't know the name of it. I think that's the one that gives all of your creatures, all of your artifact creatures, +1/+0 and menace.
Okay, I mean menace, pretty good keyword.
2 and a black. Or I could be
Ingenious
wrong.
Smith. We also see here as another not tutor effect, but a way to dig through your deck and find key pieces you want, which I think is going to be an important kind of effect. We see Sculpting Steel being the pick. That's a 3-mana clone for any artifact on the battlefield. Yeah. A high ceiling there for sure. Being able to copy something great for less mana than it costs to cast. Also tutorable with Arkham Dagsson, so interesting way to possibly have an answer in some situation where you otherwise wouldn't have an answer.
Yes, maybe you pick up this Triskelion here.
I believe Sam's inspecting the black border inner sleeve on that Triskelion, as that is a Triskelion with a white border with a special sleeve in there to make it black border to match the rest of the cube.
We have a Batter Skull, which is very powerful. I saw that
Dismember, Gliss of a Trader is in there as well.
Smelter Dragon, and this is a Power Depot, I believe, that Sam is going to take.
Yeah.
So
another fixing land here to, again, I think, open up his options and make sure he can cast all of these unique cards he's been drafting.
Sam is going to need to pick up some lands. I don't exactly know which, but he has a lot of colored cards that are quite powerful.
So far, we've seen him picking up a couple lands. He also has a Chromatic Sphere at this point, and a couple other ways to get, if you only have a couple cards of a color in your deck, you only need that one Chromatic Sphere activation, right? You're not going to need...
I don't need to redo it many
Yeah, you don't
times.
need that Blue Source over and over again. You're just going to need it for that one activation there. Urza's Bauble here, the Mishra's Bauble at home, but still quite fun. I will say a little confusing sometimes to play in paper. It's a random card revealed from your opponent's hand, and we have to check with the judge. I'm not sure if your opponent gets to know which card you saw.
Interesting.
Also, Mishra's Bauble itself in the pack. Mimic that being brought to the front here. That is a very grindy, very high ceiling card here. You get to imprint a creature that dies under it, and then just make a copy over and over and over and over again. So any creature within the battlefield ability is going to be really powerful under there. I think I saw him looking at Curious Herd, the card I was talking about pre-draft.
Mimic that, going to be the pick. That was a card that was in my personal cube for many, many years, and has one of the more fun play experiences, especially from a coverage standpoint. So
certainly when you're the one playing the Mimic that, I do have the kindest, most kind-hearted member of my play group did once say, I will never play a cube with Mimic that in it ever again. So that's been locally banned by us, unfortunately, because of that one player.
Not banned here, as Sam slammed it down as probably
we got Academy Ruins and a fixing land brought to the front here. So a way to rebuy those important artifacts or a way to make sure you can cast your spells. Tough decision.
Sam's going to go with the fixing.
I think he probably will as well.
I think he's going to go with the fixing.
Ooh, we're thinking about it, though.
He's going to go with the fixing.
I would bet he's looking for artifacts that can be sacrificed at this point. And we have Arkham Daxon as a sacrifice outlet. We have Oni Cult Anvil is I believe, a sacrifice outlet, if I'm not getting the rules text on that wrong. What was the pick? I missed it.
We went with the fixing. We went with Dark Switch.
All right, great.
So a
Thada Adele.
Porcelain Legionnaire, Trading Post, Throne of Geth,
Trading Post, and
Kataki.
Ooh, boy. Now, Kataki, interesting. A symmetrical effect. So it's a really powerful hate card against artifacts, but if you are playing a deck with a bunch of artifacts, probably going to be kind of hard to break the symmetry. So to me, that reads as a big signal for the dedicated anti-artifact deck, which I think is pretty much always going to be green-white in this environment.
Sam going with Throne of Geth, which is
that's a very creative pick.
Very creative pick.
Now, we do see a ton of +1/+1 counters already in the cards he's drafted, so that could potentially be a way to get a lot of value. And again, another sacrifice outlet. Maybe Sam's looking to put together some sort of recursive loops with the cards he's drafting.
We saw an Ichor Wellspring a little bit earlier, I believe. Might have been the pack he opened, so could potentially be wheeling that. And then we have a Chief Engineer, which is another card that can reduce the cost of your artifacts, maybe team up with that Artificer class.
Yeah, I would say that I think Ichor Wellspring at this point would be a very high pick for Sam.
I completely agree.
Because we do have a lot of sacrifice outlets already. And
Mycosynth Wellspring, too, if you can find that.
Yeah, some mana fixing would be great. Considering his pool, considering his pack, Oswald Fiddlebender here, one of my favorite Artifact Matters cards printed in recent years. It's basically a birthing pod in white for artifacts.
I don't want Sam to draft this Warhammer card.
Because I don't know what it is.
That's right. From a purely selfish reason. Okay.
It must be noted, the Warhammer cards, great pickups for Artifact Matters cubes. If you're an Artifact cube designer, looks like makeshift munitions maybe here being the pick. Another sacrifice outlet. So really deep on those sacrifice outlets now. I think looking for cards now to benefit from those sacrifices. Looking for those payoffs. Ooh, Ponder. Ponder is really hard for me to pass up. I'm not going to lie.
Andy's attention has been piqued.
Ooh, yeah.
Skeleton Key, or Skeleton Shard, rather. A fairly powerful card,
and it's a pretty quick Skeleton Shard from Sam here. Not really thinking too hard, it seems. That's definitely the pick.
Yeah, you're able to tap a black and return an artifact creature. Basically
that's one of the payoffs for these sacrifice effects, right?
Yes, that's a huge deal. That's actually a massive pickup for Sam. I don't want to understate how critical that was. And that came at the very last. That was his 8th pick of this pack, as we're back on
Stoic Rebuttal, I believe. That's a counterspell that is actually counterspell as opposed to cancel if you've got enough artifacts.
Which very easy to do. Only requires 3. So Shimmermere, that Whirler Rogue, that has got to be the pick.
That I gotta say, I think that's a disrespectfully late Whirler Rogue.
That is disrespectfully late in a normal cube. That's in.
Yeah, I mean that card may be a little unassuming if you've never played with it before. You're like, okay, a 2/2, a couple 1/1s, but 3 bodies makes it almost impossible for any aggressive opponent to kill you in combat, at least anytime soon. And that late game ability to make any creature unblockable is a great way to steal a game that you otherwise would lose.
And this cube, it might make all of your creatures unblockable.
That is true.
Tapping 2 artifacts to give that ability. Oh, Triskelion also pretty late. That is I mean, I would
say a lot
say
of mana, but it's a really powerful effect, and it is on theme for Sam's deck.
And Sam has that Sculpting Steel, and that's a powerful thing to copy.
Absolutely. But those +1/+1 counters, going to be able to proliferate them with Throne of Geth, going to be able to modular onto that Triskelion to put more +1/+1 counters on there. So
Steel Overseer, early pick.
Absolutely. So maybe a little, just let's say underrate for modern card design development, but definitely very synergistic with what Sam is doing, and could be one of the ways to, in that late game, just sacrifice your board to all your valuable sack outlets, start dumping all those modular counters on your Triskelion, and kill your opponent. If I'm Sam, the card I most want to see in Pack 3 is Arcbound Ravager. That card is going to turn a lot of these cards into extremely explosive, almost immediate wins if we see that card in these packs.
Yes. I would say that is probably...
I can't imagine picking anything else over Arcbound Ravager if I'm Sam at this point.
No cranial plating? That's a tough one to pass.
I mean...
That's a tough one to pass.
That will, I guess, come down to his own predilections, but I think for me, I think it'd be the Ravager. We see Galazeth Prismari there in front of the pack possibly, but we're going to go with the Urza's Bauble.
Which can sacrifice itself, obviously something Sam is interested in.
Also just a 0 mana cost artifact, which if you're going to need something to sacrifice to Arkham Dagston, you don't want to spend mana on it. A pretty good way to do it. Picking up a Wicker Ball Elder, I believe there.
Likely not going to make the deck, but it doesn't hurt to take away...
Now, Thada's still in the pack. Double blue might be kind of hard, but we did see that Whirler Rogue wheel, so maybe Sam thinking mostly blue.
Potentially.
Some brilliant commentator might have been able to predict that. All right, going into pack 3. Again, I find him. I want to see that Kolotha Forge Master. Oh boy, that is another card that is very on theme for what Sam is doing.
Precursor Golem also quite powerful.
Precursor Golem really good, though. Here, that downside of any spell targeting that golem being copied for all your golems. Not only is going to be meaningful because there's a lot of disenchants running around, so it's going to be pretty easy to actually undo all that value. There are also a bunch of other golems running around, and you might not realize that it's going to also hit your non-token golems.
Precursor Golem and friends, not the only golems in town.
So Forge Master here, very on theme. Very on theme with what Sam is doing. It's another tutor, it's another toolbox card, and it's another sacrifice outlet.
He's got a Bolus of Citadel, and he knows how powerful that card is. No matter what, Bolus of Citadel is going to end up in Sam's deck. I'm confident of that. And this is going to allow him to get it out early. But Solemn, the other pick, which I would say is quite the opposite. Literally, your meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
I'm going to fix my mana. I'm going to draw a card. I'm going to put a body.
But, I mean, it's also very synergistic with his deck. Being able to sacrifice that to draw that card immediately instead of having to wait to die in combat. Yeah. We do see the Forge Master, though.
I was never in doubt.
I would expect Sam to take the Forge Master there. Sam being the much more, I would say, ambitious drafter. He's always looking to do the most powerful thing at the table. He's not looking to play fair magic.
Speaking of power, we have a Dance of the Manse and a Master Transmuter. I believe 2 cards that are pretty high on the power level scale for this cube.
Key in the Lar.
Vault Scourge. Rise and Shine.
That card is a great win condition for a deck like this. You get to play a bunch of non-creature artifacts and then just one-shot your opponent.
Yeah. Your buddy Cataclysmic Hulk was in here.
Slowbad Goblin Tinkerer, another sacrifice outlet.
Ooh, we have a star. We picked the.
I think it's vegetable time, Justin.
I think Sam agrees.
Yeah.
The last card in the pack. Don't you love it when you go through and you're like, I'm not sure what I want to take. Last card, you're like, you know what? That's the one.
All right, moving into the next pack here. Reckless Fireweaver, a card that I saw do some work in the aggressive deck, aforementioned aggressive deck in my pod yesterday. This partner card here, forgive me, I don't remember the name of that card off the top of my head.
Arlax.
Yeah, Arix or something. That card is also...
Armix, Filigree Thrasher.
Yeah, that card is also very good in this environment as an Artifact Matters payoff that can actually act as creature removal. I will say the artifact removal is somewhat plentiful here. I found maybe the non-artifact creature removal to be a little bit lower than you might expect in terms of density in this environment. And that was... I would value highly ways to get rid of my opponent's occasional non-artifact creature because there are some very powerful ones floating around.
Sam looking like he is heavily considering this counter spell,
and
which would
Bosch
be another,
Iron Golem.
the classic artifact finisher Bosch Iron Golem.
Or this Armix.
I have a feeling that he's going to go with this counterspell. Sam does want some amount of interaction. He loves to play interactive Magic, and for him, you do have two options because Armix is also interaction. I'm going to guess he's going to take counterspell.
Now, Justin, have you ever had the distinct pleasure of casting a counterspell off the top of your deck for 2 life with Bulba's Citadel?
No, and Sam's not going to have the opportunity to either.
Okay, well, you know.
He does take the Armix. But again, this is interaction. As you said, this can kill creatures by discarding cards. So
also maybe a curve consideration. You know, this deck is, again, very ambitious, and we don't see a ton of early board presence, I would say, here. Some of our first picks in Pack 1 are really the cheap cards that are going to get on board early, and then beyond that, we've seen a lot of toolbox cards, a lot of sacrifice outlets. You're going to need stuff to sacrifice. You need that bread and butter in your deck just to make it work.
So we see an Angel of Invention, which is a very powerful
Mirror Retriever
card.
is speaking to me here.
Yes.
Great to sacrifice, great for all these recursive loops. Titan of Industry, not nothing. Meteor Golem also pulled to the front of the pack. More removal of various kinds.
Yeah, I think the Mirror Retriever. This is the deck he's been building. You want Mirror Retriever.
I think you do want it. Maybe he's wondering if he can potentially wheel it. I don't think that's likely to happen, given that there are so many Artifact Matters decks in this pod.
I think you're more likely to wheel the Meteor Golem. It's a higher mana value. Obviously, everyone's going to be able to cast it, but Mirror Retriever, that's like kind of the reason for the season of what you're doing.
Good. I love to see it. I'm a big, I really consider my curve when I'm drafting. I like to have a cheap spells in my deck, and so I think that Mirror Retriever is definitely the pick for me as well.
Well, speaking of mirrors, we have at least 2 or maybe 3 more in this pack.
Along with the Herald of Anguish catching Sam's attention briefly. That's just a Mana Confluence pull to the front there, and a Pentad Prism. Pentad Prism, a great way to fix your mana, and also a great way to just have a dinky little artifact you can sacrifice once you've used those Sunburst counters.
And a really great way to really splash those couple of cards, because like you said,
exactly.
You don't need repeated mana. You just need to be able to cast them one time and then they're done.
So that would be, I believe he has Star and Sphere, and if he gets that Pentad Prism, I would say that any one pip card in any color is definitely on the table for Sam.
And Sam loves to play a 5-color deck, and I would say that it is definitely possible that we see the same here. Maybe not have any green cards, but it is Sam Black. He could try to make sure he has one in there just to say that he did.
I would not be surprised to see a power outlier green card come around in these last couple picks of this pack here that would make Sam consider playing it. And we do see the Pentad Prism.
Yep.
I like that over the Mana Confluence here. I think it's effectively doing the same thing, but you're doing it more on theme with what your deck is trying to do. That's Ruin Grinder on the top there, a mountain cycling card that is a big menace creature that when it dies draws everybody 7 cards. So very swingy.
I think that's Malira from Dominaria, which is a very, very powerful.
We see Mana Leak being brought to the front here. Bloodforged Battle Axe is a very cool equipment that allows you to make copies of it every time you hit your opponent with it. And those copies can also make copies. So if you have enough mana, you can make a lot of Bloodforged Battle Axes. And then even if you're not using those in combat, great sacrifice fodder.
Yes. I would say for that reason, that would be a highly desirable card for Sam, but he does take the Mana Leak after passing up the counterspell earlier.
That's a late Rex Sage, Massacre Worm, Whip of Erebos, Everflowing Chalice, Twin Shot Sniper, a card I love in this environment and most environments, to be frank.
Agreed.
And I would say the Lonely Auriok Salvagers, I was a little disappointed not to see a Lion's Eye Diamond in this cube, given that Auriok Salvagers is in. There's already a bunch of spell bombs, but, you know, reserve list be reserve list. That card is maybe out of the budget for most Magic players.
And there's also Viridian Revel in here. Not something Sam's going to be able to do. That's 2 green pips. I think that's a road too far.
Even with the Pentad Prisms and the Spheres, we do see the Twin Shot Sniper getting picked here. I love this deck, Justin.
Yeah, Sam's it's tough to beat when it comes to creative deck construction during a draft.
I am very curious to see how many of those cheaper threats we saw him take in Pack 1 end up actually making the deck list. I think
a very good question.
I think we saw Sam maybe adjust his strategy as those picks were flowing in Pack 1 from perhaps a more aggressive on-board deck to more of a toolbox, late-game value engine kind of deck. I think there's going to be ways to loop all of his best cards repeatedly. Thopter Engineer, a card I think is a little bit disrespectfully late here as well. That card gives all your artifact creatures haste, in addition to 2 bodies for 3 mana. Haste, a very relevant keyword.
I agree. 100% on board. I was going to call out that card as well. So
we see Triplicate Titan brought to the front of the pack here. A card that many cube designers have loved. Yeah, exactly. Every time he picks up his plow and I see that that Tower of the Magistrate, I get excited all over again.
Yeah, like I forgot that was in there.
I keep seeing him like, oh, pick that. Oh, it's already in his pool. Great.
And I think Sam just doing some inventory. There is going to have to be a little bit of massaging for this mana for some of the cards that aren't just the single pip cards. Sam does have a handful of those, but I think if he can stick to blue and one other color, going to be able to have a successful mana base.
I will say one thing to call out about that Triplicate Titan. I believe one of those tokens has lifelink. Is that true? No, I'm sorry. Flying Vigilance Trample. Never mind. Disregard. Oh boy, Precursor Golem and Crystal Shard still in the pack.
And Sam, I love a Crystal Shard. I will say I'm biased. Crystal Shard, Erratic Portal. I'm a big fan of those. One of
my first loves in Cube was I was playing Crystal Shard.
Yeah, classic Cube card.
I got to witness yesterday in a draft of this Cube another player have a Crystal Shard, make a copy of the Crystal Shard with Sculpting Steel, then use both of them on your opponent's end step to tap down, try and return a creature, right? So their opponent has to pay 2 to keep it in play. You see the Crystal Shard being the pick here, so I'll continue with my story. Then in the next turn, untapped, paid 2 more times to try and tap it down, or try and bounce it twice more. Their opponent saw all this, had 4 mana up, but then sacrificed the Sculpting Steel, recurred it to a 5th time, activate Crystal Shard to bounce a big threat that they needed to answer. So 5 Crystal Shard activations in a turn and a half out of this Cube.
That's incredible. And we see what is looking like Slow Bad versus a Warhammer card, or maybe Dance the Manse, which I am actually kind of surprised this here. That card is just wildly powerful, but Slow Bad going to be the pick.
Slow Bad very on theme.
Yep, sacrificing artifacts. That also Reckless Fireweaver. I'm honestly very, very surprised.
I would say from what's in the pack, I don't think we have an aggressive red drafter at this table. A lot of these really aggressive red cards are going late. The Thopter Engineer. So I think maybe that just wasn't a lane that anybody fell into.
I think that people are maybe misunderstanding that card as something that you need to do aggressively. Yeah, it's a 1/3 for 2.
You can just sit there.
It's got a butt, and you can just sit there and ping your opponent. And if you're planning to defeat them with damage, that's going to do a lot of incidental damage.
Yeah, and in this Cube, you just do whatever your deck normally wants to do, and that card will just slowly kill your opponent.
Exactly. We see
or sometimes quickly kill your opponent.
A Titan of Industry, which will 100% not be in Sam's deck. And
now Trigon Predator is a card that I would consider
one of the better cards in the Cube.
That's
perhaps.
One of those single green mana cards that we could see potentially coming in off of those Chromatic Spheres, Chromatic Stars, Pentab Prisms. If you can't answer that, and if you have a Trigon Predator and your opponent can't answer it, I think it's going to run away with the game in almost any matchup in this Cube.
Sam picking it, following it up with Llanowar Wastes, and then a Peace Strider to round out the draft.
I would say that Peace Strider not completely out of the question to make this list.
High valued sideboard card as well, in the event that there is an aggressively slanted deck. So
our players moving on to pool registration now. I really do love this deck. I've said it before and I'll say it again. How much of a Bulbous' Citadel deck do you think this is? How much we build around Bulbous' Citadel?
I don't think Sam can resist. So probably a decent amount of Bulbous' Citadel focus going on. And we can see if we can, let's watch and see if Sam, Sam registering his...
registering his opponent's pool right now.
Aside, the person that drafted across from him. So we can move away from Sam. We're not going to find out exactly how he's going to do that until we get into the game. Maybe we can get an actual deck list, which is going to be really important here because Sam has a wealth of options.
Justin, I would say that if you had me guess what the main deck was going to look like here, I would expect to be off by a big margin. I think Sam is going to be seeing through the matrix a bit and finding the right card combinations to make this work. There's a lot of ways in this deck, comparatively a lot of ways to find that Bulbous Citadel and put it in play.
Yes.
And there are a couple of edge case interactions we haven't talked about, both Chromatic Star and Chromatic Sphere. Great way to dig through the top of your deck and find the next spell you can cast, get those extra lands off the top by drawing them. So I think this deck could be a very scary Bulbous Citadel deck, and it can fall back on a lot of other high-value loops.
And Sam has a lot of the sacrifice stuff, and maybe that could be the focus of his deck with a little flourish at the end, because Citadel, a wildly powerful card. Now, that's probably going to limit him to primarily focusing on black cards and blue cards to be able to cast that, because Bulbous Citadel, if you're not cheating it into play with something like Arkham Daxum, you are going to be paying actual factual retail price, which is black, 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 and 3.
I wonder how much Sam would be planning to cast it with both called off the Forge Master and Arkham Dagson in this deck, I could see him saying, you know what, between that, Pentap Prism for double black if I need it, maybe we don't actually have to be that heavy on a black in our mana base to reliably play this card.
Could be true. He did pick up a handful of black dual lands.
Right.
He has Dark Shores. He has Concealed Courtyard. He has the Black-Red Bridge. He has, I think there was a Land War Waste. Now I don't think there's playing any green, but so, there is a lot of tangential black fixing along with his other colors, which is going to be very helpful and kind of just honestly worked out because he picked a lot of those cards before picking the Bolas Citadel, perhaps knowing that was a card that he was going to absolutely take if he saw it.
That was pack 1 that we saw both Arkham Dagson and the Bolas Citadel make it into his deck. So had that relatively early in the draft, got both sides of that, and could draft around that kind of strategy. The other thing I want to call out here is that I think in our games, we should be conscious of the fact that there are a lot of artifact sacrifice outlets in Sam's deck. And incidentally, a decent amount of artifact lands, which you might not notice on board if you're watching that there's actually more sacrifice fodder that Sam has in play than you might expect. We could very easily see a makeshift munitions just go ahead and take over the game at the end. I'm pretty sure you can sacrifice artifact or creature. I don't think it cares if it's a land. So
no artifact or creature.
So you can just go ahead in there to sacrifice, a few lands, a couple of your last artifacts, and burn them out.
Normally, I'm upset at makeshift munitions, but I'm a huge Goblin Bombardment fan.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I don't want to say strictly better, but definitely has more application with the artifact stack.
When I saw makeshift munitions get printed, I was like, okay, they made a more fair Goblin Bombardment. That seems fine. Having played with it a bunch in some cubes in my local play group, I think it's actually more of a side grade than I initially gave it credit for. Okay. It's kind of a different card. Obviously, superficially very similar, but being able to sacrifice artifacts and that extra point of damage is really relevant in some situations and some decks.
I would say that since it's been printed, and that was printed in the end of 2017, 2018.
You're good at that. It's Rivals of Ixalan, I believe. I'm not sure when it was.
It's in Ixalan. It's just Ixalan proper.
Regular Ixalan.
And with makeshift munitions, since then, we've seen the advent of food tokens.
Yep.
We have seen
blood tokens.
We have seen blood tokens. We've seen
way more treasure
tokens.
Way more treasure. Way more treasure tokens.
Way more treasure tokens.
Way more treasure tokens.
So I would say in the subsequent years since that's been printed, that card has actually gotten more powerful and significantly more more support for cubes, for commander decks in general. So
one of these cards, like Goblin Bombardment, can be a real nightmare with that threat of activation. Just knowing that your opponent can at any time shock something really messes with combat. It makes you not want to play your threats that can just get makeshift munitioned out, and you can't sit there and not play your cards, so you end up kind of between a rock and a hard place.
Yes, maybe quite literally. So we are going to take a short break. We're going to let Sam finish out building his deck, the mastermind of putting this together, and
magic is happening here at CubeCon.
Yeah, magic is happening in the literal and physical sense.
I can feel the brainwaves radiating from the feature draft area. It's taking over the venue.
Andy and I are going to be as surprised as all of you watching at home for how Sam is going to put together this monstrosity and what we're going to see. But that is going to be when we come back from this break. Don't go away. We have way more Cube action coming up at CubeCon in just a moment.